dun 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 dun. I know the pieces fit 'cause I watch away. Dear small door ring. Set to love us so. Strengthen our communication. I know pieces fit 'cause oh, wait. Don't desire to point the finger. Watch your temples up, oh lover. Bring the peace. Okay. You guys are working. Weird. Why do you not show up? There we go. Now it listens. Alright. So yeah, because I wasn't able to make it last week, in a manner of speaking, whoop, let's fix this a little bit. Blah. Nah, good enough. Worry about it another time. In a manner of speaking, last night's episode was last week's, and so tonight is this week's, so to speak. And so I may end up having to do the same thing next week as well. I may not be able to. I'll see what the schedule for my other job looks like, because not this coming weekend, but the following weekend. So we're looking at the weekend of technically starting on Thursday, the 21st to the 24th. I will be with my LGS at Fan Expo in downtown Toronto. And so I will be, again, I will be working their booth. Presumably also working with, the TCG stuff. And I may actually end up getting tossed a few hours on Wednesday as well. Wednesday's set up. The event itself, I'll pull it up real quick. Fan Expo 2025 Toronto. Boop. This. And so, given this is currently Wednesday evening here, and that's what this is based on. If you notice, so this is basically 7 days and 23 hours. So, an hour before now, it would have said 8 days ago, or it would have said 8 days. So, 5 p.m., this is Wednesday, so it starts Thursday. Let's see if I can find the actual schedule thing for it. Pioneer visit. There we go. Schedule. depending on when you're going, depending on where you're going, it's things start at 2 o'clock on the in the afternoon on Thursday, and so that runs for much of the evening on that runs for much of the afternoon on Tuesday, or on Thursday, I should say, and then on all day Friday, starting around 10 in the morning, all day Saturday, same thing, all day Sunday, finishing up. They have stuff going on until the last thing they've got running starts at quarter after 5, but the main hall for exhibitors and such will close at will close at here we go. We'll close at 5 o'clock. Whoops. Artist alley, same thing. Who are we gonna have there? Let's go to all guests. Michael J. Fox, Ewan McGregor, William Shatner. I'm not gonna go through all of them, just names that I specifically recognize. Christopher Lloyd, Mike Tyson, Brandon Ruth. I don't remember him as a Superman, but that's also that's also a me thing. Michael Rosenbaum. I don't know the name, but I remember he played Lex Luthor. Catherine Tate. Ron Perlman. Oh, Sting from the WW. Well, actually, it wouldn't be. That would have been WCW. Trish Stratus. Not completely surprised because she's from the Toronto area. Doo doo doo. Plus a bunch of there's going to be a bunch of names that other people will recognize, but I don't. None of these names jump out at me for the voice actors, but that's mostly because I don't know. Yuri Lowenthal, I recognize him. That's mostly because I pay attention to the characters, but not the people that play them. Tara Platt is incredibly well known as a voice actor because she's done so many things. Again, there's Tara Platt again and Yuri Lowenthal. Comic creators. Probably not likely to see any names that I recognize because these guys are going to be likely newer to the industry. Although, I promise nothing. Not only that, but again, I would be paying attention to what was going on and not who was involved. So I do apologize to all these artists because I may very well recognize the body of work and just not recognize the name that's attached to it. And that's nothing against them at all. It's just like, for example, uh, a good analogy would be I pay attention to songs. I don't pay attention to I pay attention to songs, but I don't pay attention to uh like who's in the band, for example. I may recognize the name of the band that does it, but have no clue about, you know, who the lead vocalist is or who's on guitar or anything like that. So, again, that's nothing against them. That's very much a me thing. So, um, yeah. What can I say? It is not their fault at all in the slightest. That being said, legions. Um, if you don't know anything about legions, this was the time period when they tried doing some experiments. Torment, which was exactly a year prior, they did a set that was black heavy and followed it up with a set that was heavy on white green, but to just the right numbers that everything balanced out. Onslaught was quote unquote normal, so was Odyssey. And then Legions, they turn around and go, what if we make a set that's literally nothing but creatures? Well, how are you going to emulate instants, sorceries, enchantments, stuff of that nature? And there's a few ways to do that. Um, First of all, and I'm going to be bouncing around slightly, but first of all, you've got cards like Daru Stinger, which have an effect, that kicks in this case as, but with other cards when it enters the battlefield, there is a distinction. As a creature enters the battlefield, means that you're looking at like some kind of you're often looking at some kind of replacement effect. You're looking at a card that changes how it enters. Clone effects, stuff that copy another creature that's in play or another something else that's in play. You know, as this enters the battlefield, you may have it enter as a copy of another creature on the battlefield or something to that effect. Was it you may have clone enter the battlefield as a copy of whatever. And Daru Stinger, as this enters, you may reveal any number of soldiers in your hand, and this enters with a +1/+1 counter on for each soldier you reveal this way. So that's amplify, and that happens a reasonable amount in this set. You've also got like when a player cycles a card, because cycling was still a thing at that point. You've got the occasional when this enters the battlefield, or other similar triggers. And then you've also got things like when this creature is turned face up, because Morph was still a thing. Well, we're not going to have instants or sorceries. How about we have triggers that kick in when you turn it face up? Well, that works, kind of. You still have the same kind of like the big difference between abilities like this and an instant or sorcery is an instant or sorcery is a spell, and so therefore things like counterspell and mana leak and um, negate and stuff like that will work on them. These are abilities. Specifically, these are triggered abilities. So you need something that can stop a triggered ability. Those were not exactly common. In fact, see if I can spell right. And then format pre-modern. Literally, the only card that can counter a triggered ability will come out in the following set. Yeah, it would come out in the following set. You'd actually, which for all intents and purposes meant that when legions came out, abilities like this were uncounterable apart from, like, this one targets a creature. The way to counter that is to make sure the creature that you're dealing with is no longer a legal target. Apart from that, yeah, there's a problem. And then you'll still have the occasional, like, activated ability or whatever. Swooping Talon and Daru Stinger and, Avon Redeemer and your typical suite of activated abilities. Planar Guide is gives you a mass blink effect. you know. Celestial Gatekeeper gives you some kind of reanimation going on, and so on and so forth. So you have cards that can emulate the ability of spells, of instants and sorceries and whatnot, but they're all attached to creatures. And so you have to build them a little bit differently. So now that we've got that sorted out, let's kick things off. And we'll start off with Leash of the Axe, which is a 4-mana 2/3 with Vigilance. Morph for 2, which is actually pretty decent considering, if you look at what we had last episode, which here that's last night. A lot of the morph costs tend to be a little on the high side. This is actually quite reasonable. It's 3 mana now, and then 2 later. And it's a 2/3 Vigilance that says when this creature's turn face up, untap it. And the reason it has that is because likely when you're going to, this is the sort of creature that you attack with it. Well, then you turn it face up, but it's supposed to have Vigilance, so you untap it so it gets its Vigilance back. And sure, you're paying 5 mana in total for it, which is 1 mana more than it costs natively. A 2/3 Vigilance, in my opinion, should probably, well, let me think here. Because even back, because at that point, as we were talking last night, or I'll say last episode, we were looking at 2 mana 2/2s in white. That was actually a thing. I think it might have been Fresh Volunteers. I think Fresh Volunteers was from Masks, and I cannot remember the name of the more recent one that had come out at that point. It wasn't Eager Cadet, because that's a 1 mana 1/1. I forget what it's called. But you know, if you're looking at a 2 mana 2/2, I could see I could see this being 3 mana. I could arguably see it being 3 mana, like double white plus 1 potentially, because you've got an extra point of toughness and you got vigilance. S- Somewhere in the 3 mana range, either 2 white plus 1 or 1 white plus 2. I'm not sure where I fit in, you know, where my brain fits in there. But now you're giving it morph. And often, quite often, you'll find that the more flexibility a card has, uh, the more you're likely to end up paying for it. Like a good example would be a card like, you know, Aftershock. You know, a card that I like to keep bringing up because Aftershock, destroy target artifact, creature, or land that deals 3 damage to you. Well, let's break this down. If you look at destroy target artifact by itself, you're looking at a 2 mana at historically a 2 mana instant, which was by most people's accounts even back then overcosted because by that point you like in the exact same set where Shatter was introduced, you also had Disenchant. And the only difference between Disenchant and Shatter, well, there were two differences. Disenchant could also hit enchantments. It was the same cost, it was the same speed, it was the same rarity, but it was white instead of red. Shatter should have cost like, you know, you make it like, you probably could have got away with it being like a single red. Maybe, you know, red as a sorcery. I don't know. But red plus 1 as an instant when you have disenchant in the same set, bad plan. Although that also gives you the idea of, you know, if you're playing certain colors are better at certain things than others. So you get a learning curve at that point. Anyway, artifact, 2 mana instant. Land, 2 red plus 1. Sorry, 1 red plus 2. So knock off this last mana symbol. Red plus 2. Pillage, which had come out by then. This was 1997. So so at least 2 years earlier, I think it was. You had Pillage come out in Alliances. I'm pretty sure it was. 2 red plus 1. Destroy target artifact or land. Well, now you're paying an extra mana on top of Pillage to also have the ability to hit a creature. Now you're comparing this to something like Fisher, which was 2 red plus 3 as a instant, which could conceivably be 2 red plus 2 as a sorcery. And you got creature or land. Did not allow regeneration. This does. That's a minor detail. But the flexibility of having three distinct things that can hit, you've now got an additional cost. In this case, the additional cost is it's dealing 3 damage to you. So the more flexibility that you can throw on a card, the more it ends up costing. This is why Desert Twister back in the day, you know, sure, you have Ice Storm, which costs the same as Stone Rain, it was green plus 2. You had, you eventually got, what do you call it? Crumble, which was like 1 green, destroy a enchantment, no, destroy a artifact, and they gain life based on its mana value, I think. You had Tranquility, which blew up all enchantments. for 1 green plus 2. It didn't. Green did not have any way to kill a creature outright. The fight mechanic didn't exist yet. So if you want to kill something that was not an artifact, not an enchantment, and not a land, and you were playing green, you're playing Desert Twister because nothing else existed, and you're paying 6 mana for it. The flip side of which, and that came out in, I want to say, Arabian Nights? The flip side of which, Alpha gave you Land of Warrior Elves, Birds of Paradise, and Wild Growth, plus, the artifacts that we all know and love, Soul Ring and the Moxen and everything else. I'm ignoring those for the sake of convenience. Turn 1, let's say Land of Warrior Elf. Turn 2, Wild Growth, Birds of Paradise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn 3, Desert Twister is viable. Because your land, like a land for each turn, and and even turn 4, having to wait until turn 4 because maybe it took you a little longer to draw your third accelerant. And that's ignoring stuff like Soul Ring, which in my opinion, in a situation like that, you want that on turn 2 or turn 3. You don't want that on turn 1, because on turn 1, all those other accelerants cost green to cast. You want to be able to drop that on turn 1. So, yeah. But, anyway, the more flexible the card, so it's not unreasonable to cast Desert Twister on turn 3 or 4. And that's just out of stuff in, like, Alpha, Beta, Unlimited. Leash of the Axe, you have that extra flexibility because you can play it with Morph, which is sometimes the thing that you want to do anyway. This is why it's a 4-drop. Still feels a little overcosted. I think back then I would have felt it was a little overcosted, but it was a cost that made sense. Would I play this now? Probably not. Probably, like, we're looking at Human Soldier. You want a 2/3 with Vigilance. You want a decent sized creature with Vigilance that's a human or a soldier. I'm sure you can do better. Lowland Tracker. 5 mana for a 2/2 with First Strike with Provoke. That Provoke is relevant. Whenever this creature attacks, you may have target creature defending player controls untap and block it if able. Because block creatures, generally speaking, there's always an exception. Block creatures can't, try this again. Tapped creatures can't block. I think it's Michiko Kondo that turns around and allows otherwise. But tapped creatures can't block. This turns around and says, oh, you're tapped. That's adorable. You're blocking me. Because the key is it blocks the creature that provoked it, if able. Well, what does that mean? Sure, you're paying 5 mana for a 2/2 with First Strike. So I could see 3 mana for a 2/2 First Strike. You are playing, this is at common. So you're paying 2 additional mana to go, I'm attacking. You're having to block me. Do you know what makes a card like this dangerous? is throwing something like Death Touch on it. This has got first strike. You are now turning around and saying, hey, by the way, your commander has to block me. Hey, by the way, your giant ocean beast has to block me. Hey, by the way, your whatever big scary beastie they have has to block me. You give this thing Death Touch in any way, shape, or form, and this thing is dangerous AF. I do not. If you're playing with cards that can grant Death Touch, this, yes, it's a big, it's a lot of mana for a small body, but this is going to start killing stuff turn after turn after turn. And you get to choose what's dying. And this is in white. Especially if you're playing on a budget, would not be unhappy to see somebody play that. And again, the would not be unhappy to see somebody play that. This is not a I point at you and I laugh. This is a oh, that's cool. Etc., etc., etc. Let's go down that rabbit hole. And it's like, I mean, a lot of times I'd be, well, I never would have thought of that, except I'm thinking of it now because this is what happens when you're doing this stuff on stream. Wingbeat Warrior. Speaking of first strike, 3 mana for a 2/1 flyer, which is fine. Again, slightly overcosted because at that point a 2/2 flyer for 3 mana would have been considered balanced. So, slightly overcosted, but only slightly. But it's got a morph cost, which is the same as its mana cost. However, again, when this creature is turned face up, which at that point is very much incredibly difficult to counter because there are no counter spells for triggered abilities yet. They literally do not exist yet. Because I just did a search of, a couple minutes ago. They don't exist. When this creature is turned face up, target creature gains first strike till end of turn. This is, for all intents and purposes, barring removing the creature that's getting targeted, you're getting first strike till end of turn. So you're looking at something like Lance, but uncounterable. This is, I think this is actually vaguely reasonable at this point. I think this is actually vaguely reasonable at this point. The thing is, you have to be playing with enough face down stuff. We're talking Commander. You have to be playing with enough face down stuff to actually make playing this worthwhile. But if you're playing with face down stuff and you're playing white, suddenly going, oh, by the way, this gets first strike now. That is going to throw off so much combat math. Cloud Reach Cavalry. Probably, I would say better than the first 3 that I've covered. But the Lowland Tracker is actually, in my opinion, a lot better than people give it credit for. Cloud Reach Cavalry, 2 mana for a 1/1. But as long as you control a bird, it gets +2/+2 and has flying. So suddenly you're looking at a 2 mana 3/3 flyer. And all you have to do is have a bird. Again, anything that's natively a bird, plus anything that's got changeling, including stuff like uh, Rune Stalactite, which is a card a lot of people forget about. 1 to cast, 2 to equip. Equip creature gets +1/+1 and is every creature type. And that gaining every creature type can be immensely huge in so many decks. So imagine throwing Rune Stalactite on the Cloudreach Cavalry. It's a 2/2, but suddenly it's a bird. So now it's a 4/4 flyer. And oh no, the equipment fell off. Well, just equip it as something else, and suddenly this is still a 3/3 flyer. You know, plus you get people occasionally gifting you birds and whatever else. Not often, but very occasionally something like that will occur. And yeah, actually pretty good. And pretty easy to just make into, hey, by the way, here's a 3/3 flyer for 2 mana. Swooping Talon. Again, so first of all, 2/6 that averages to a 4/4. Do the math on it based on a 4/4. However, I am glad that they took the route that I mentioned, last episode. And went with if we're going to make the stats unbalanced, let's make one of them match the mana value. This is a 6 mana, 2/6 with flying, that you can make it lose flying till end of turn. Now, why would you make it lose flying? Well, look at the next line. Provoke. This has got the same something else must block me. This is going to take, because this is a 2/6, this is going to go, oh nice, you've got a 5/5. Okay, I'll pay mana. I'll have this fly down to ground level. Yeah, that 5/5, I'm attacking with this, but that has to block me. What? No, it has to block here. No, here. No, you're coming here. And as a result, this makes you more able to decide what you're attacking with, how you're attacking, etc., etc., because you're forcing, instead of the opponent deciding what they're blocking with and how, you are enforcing that decision yourself. And the only way they can turn around and say, well, no, I'm not blocking, is for it to become tapped before blockers can be declared. Or some other effect that says, hey, by the way, you can't block. But yeah, Swooping Talon, again, because Provoke is going to force combat to work more in your favor than you expect. And as a result, if you're playing birds, if you're playing bird tribal, I want you to at least look at this card. At least consider the ability of being able to play this card and look at what Provoke does. Provoke will turn around and say, no. Your big creature has to block here so my other stuff can get through easier. And, if you're attacking with 3 creatures, your Swooping Talon is going to take the one blocker that they've got, because maybe they only have a single blocker. You're blocking here, these guys are getting through, and so you can plan around your combat a lot easier that way. Starlight Invoker. The only reason to consider a card like this, in my opinion, is if you are playing if you're playing a deck that cares about gaining life, and you want to gain a bunch of life at a time. So, as I've mentioned in the past, you've got two styles of, decks that care about life gain. If you're to gain 10 life, would your deck rather gain 10 life at once or have 10 instances of gaining 1 life? And a card like this, to me, more falls into the first camp. It wants to gain a bunch of life in one shot. Because sometimes there are effects that say, like for example, there's, was it, is it veto of, veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. An effect like this, you combine that with the Invoker, you gain 5, target opponent loses 5 in one shot. Combine the, compare that to Epicure of Blood. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. With a card like Epicure of Blood, you want to have 10 instances of gaining 1 life because you will ping 10 times, and so you'll drain for 10. Compare that to, the Starlight Invoker that we just saw, which is gain 5 life in one shot. The Epicure of Blood is going to see that as a single instance of gaining life. They're going to lose 1 life each, and that's it. Veto is going to turn around and go, oh, you gained 5 life. Okay, they lose 5. So the Starlight Invoker, if you're playing a card like this, I would play this in a deck, and to be fair, these are not the best examples. They're just examples I can think of off the top of my head. But Starlight Invoker is more likely to want to go into a deck that's got Veto rather than the Epicure, because the Epicure is going to see a single instance of gaining life, and it's got a small payoff for it. Whereas Veto just turns around and does it based on however much life it was. So, if you're to play this at all, you're playing it in a deck that cares about gaining a bunch of life at once. So keep that in mind. It's not a bad creature on the, otherwise. I probably wouldn't play it in a cleric deck. I probably wouldn't play it in a human deck. We're assuming we're talking creature types. Mutants might be a consideration, but mutants playing white, maybe. Defender of the Order. 4 mana for a 2/4, which feels about right for that period. Quite often your white creatures were lopsided in favor of toughness. So it's kind of a little bit like, however big it's going to be, fill up its toughness first, and then drop the rest into power. And fill up its toughness first. When do I stop? What's its mana value? Stop there. So a 4 mana creature, realistically at that point, would be about a 3/3. So, but is this going to be a 3/3 or is this going to be lopsided? Well, this particular one they decided was going to be lopsided because it was based more on defense. So, fill up to, because it costs 4 toughness, and throw the rest in power. Okay, here you go. And this feels right. This feels right. And I can't wait until we get a white analog to Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and the Yavimaya Cradle of Growth. I can't wait till we get the white. I can't wait till we get the white analog. That being said, when it's turned face up, so again, this is all but uncounterable. The fun part is creatures you control get +0/+2 till end of turn. So till end of turn, this is going to be a 2/6. Might you have interest in this in some kind of Toughness Matters deck that runs white? Possibly. Possibly, conceivably, maybe, potentially. You know, basically use this as a combat trick. Because when it turns face up, you know, if it's dealing damage based on its toughness, it's gonna become a 4. You know, it's gonna deal damage based on 4 toughness rather than 2 power. But then it's because it's creatures and not other creatures. This +0/+2 affects itself as well. So suddenly, till end of turn, this is now a 2/6, which means it's going to deal damage based on 6 toughness. If you're even at all considering playing with any face down cards at all, consider throwing and you're looking at a Toughness Matters deck, consider this in your list. And it's also only like 19 cents. You know, if you're paying like, this is like your bulk, your bulk rare bin card. Daru Stinger. I mentioned Daru Stinger earlier. Creatures by default do not enter with counters. So therefore, entering with counters is considered what's called a replacement effect, but it replaces not entering with counters with entering with counters based on something. Daru Stinger takes a look and goes, cool. Well, I've got 2 soldiers in my hand. So this comes into play. I'm going to reveal 2 soldiers. Okay. Notice that this has a class type, but no, it's not human, it's not dwarf, it's not elf, it's not, Phyrexian, it's not this, that, whatever. It's just soldier, which I find interesting. Because by this point they're definitely giving everything. What kind of individual is it? Here's its class. What to use the D&D term that's been getting used for over half a century. What race is it? Race in the sense of elf, dwarf, gnome, orc, half orc, goblin, etc., etc. And so Darius Stinger, I'll reveal two soldiers. Okay. As it enters, I reveal two soldiers, and then it enters with 2+1 counters. And then you commonly get a at this point, and they've eventually largely phased it out. But at this point, you commonly had creatures in white that could tap to deal damage to an attacking or blocking creature. And even during Lorwyn, which would be, what, a decade later or something like that, that was still a thing that you could get. And so, but that is largely phased out. It still pops up once in a while, but it's largely phased out of the game. And if it's got 2+1/+1 counters on it, tap. This creature deals damage equal to the number of +1 counters on it to target attacking or blocking creature. Well, I revealed two. So it's now a 3/3 that I tap to do 2 damage to a creature that's in combat. And do keep in mind, we are looking at. I just saw somebody. Sorry, somebody was confused that I was streaming tonight. I'm streaming tonight because I missed last week. Anyway, you are looking at +1 counters. So you are looking at counters. So anything that deals with counters, you know, Gav comes to mind. I can't remember what's Guru of Spores? Is that what you're called? Yeah. Pay a mana, remove a +1 counter from a creature control, create make a sapling. Or pay 1 and sack a creature, put a +1 counter on target creature. Coming up with excess creatures is easy. By the way, you're playing white because you're paying white, black, and green. So you're playing white for sure. And all you have to do is have a few soldiers in your deck. Again, changelings count. I figure if you probably got about a dozen-ish, you should be fine. You should always have, by that point, you'll probably have another one by the time you cast this that you can reveal. Of course, it doesn't care because it's just asking about how many +1 counters are on it. It doesn't care where the counters come from. It can come from something that has nothing to do with its own inherent ability whatsoever. It could come from an effect like Battle Growth, or Thrive, some random pump spell. It could come from Gav, sack a creature, put +1 counter. It could come from anything. This could become an artifact, and it could have got them from modular. So, it just cares that it has at least a 1+1 counter on it, and then it can start pinging. So, there's ways to make that work for you. Stoke Champion. Often this is just going to be a 2-mana 2/2. Double white for a 2/2. However, if you have a reasonable amount of cycling in your deck, And especially if you've got a card like Fluctuator in your deck, which, reduces the cost. I believe it's technically an activation cost of cards that you cycle by 2 mana. You know, Stoic Champion, you can sit there and cycle like 3 cards, make it an 8/8 till end of turn. Plus get the ability from whatever whatever triggers from cycling. So if you're building around cycling, you're probably putting this in your deck. Even Redeemer. 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer that taps to prevent 2 damage to any target. Actually surprisingly good. At that point, again, 1 white plus 2 was probably about on par for a 2/2 flyer. So you're paying an extra mana for a tap ability to prevent 2 damage. Even today, I think that would actually be fair. It wouldn't be OP, but it'd be fair. And again, any target means things that didn't exist back then. Because back then they said creature or player. That has since been reworded to say any target, which now includes anything else that can take damage, which includes planeswalkers, which includes battles. If you were looking for a damage prevention effect, this is actually really good. Especially if you got a way to give it vigilance. Again, my typical go-to for something like that is the Chroma's Memorial. Just again, because it's a common mental shortcut that I use. It's the first thing I think of that gives all my stuff. Here's 7 abilities. Is it on this list? Yes. Okay. If I want to give all my green creatures vigilance, Chroma's Memorial. Or all my blue creatures vigilance, Chroma's Memorial. Or, more interestingly, I want to give all my blue creatures trample, Chroma's Memorial. You don't have to use a Chroma's Memorial. Again, common mental shortcut. Anything that will do it. And if you're playing with damage prevention effects, this thing is going to end up doing a lot more work than it first appears. Even Warhawk. Bird Soldiers. Now, when you amplify, you take a look at the creature types that the creature that is entering has. And then whatever creature types that has, that's what you can reveal. I wonder, does that actually mean amplify? Nope. There we go. As the center, reveal any number of cards from your hand that share a creature type with it. Use the Onslaught card, Artificial Evolution. Yes. This does work. This does work the way I think it does. Okay. So, again, mental shortcuts. Mask with Nexus gives all creatures you control all creature types. This means that because it says for each bird, because keep in mind, this is a reminder text. This is not rules text. This is not saying this is how the card definitely works. This is reminder text based on how the card is commonly going to get played. However, according to the rules, if you've got an effect like Mask with Nexus that gives your creatures all creature types, you can then reveal any number of creatures in your hand and it gets +1/+1 counter on it for each one. Well, how do I get to that? MTG Wiki, okay, for Amplify. Fast forward down to the rulings. Using the onslaught card, yada yada yada. The card Conspiracy can also change what types need to be revealed. Conspiracy says, as Conspiracy enters, choose a card type. Creature cards you own that aren't in play, including cards in your hand, creature spells you control, and creatures you control are the chosen type. It does not say in addition to its own type, so it'll overwrite it. But what that means is if you turn around and name Golem, all your creatures in all zones are now golems. Okay. The card Conspiracy can also change what types need to be revealed. The card you have in play is now a golem, so you need to reveal golems for it to get the buff. Amplify N means as this object enters, reveal any number of cards from your hand that share a creature type with it. So, it's only saying bird and or soldier because it is natively a bird soldier. That could change and that will affect what you reveal. So, if you have an effect like Mask with Nexus, you can reveal any number of creatures and suddenly, I reveal 5 creatures and now I've got a 5 mana 7/7 flyer because it's got, 5+1 counters on it. I figure if you do it for, if you do it for 2, you're probably, like 2, you're fine. You get a 5 mana 4/4 flyer that only required a single white mana. Again, you're playing birds, look into it. If you're playing with Mask with Nexus and you want creatures that are suddenly, oops, I'm big, look at the cards that have got Amplify. Daru Sanctifier, again, another card from the school of, I have big butt and I cannot lie. 4 mana for 1/4. When it's turned face up, destroy target enchantment. Morph cost of, white +1. Feels about right. Again, a little on the, a little on the slightly small side. but not enough that I'd actually care too much. If you can find something that does disenchant, so much the better. However, or naturalize. However, there are enough enchantments that see playing Commander, you're almost always going to find a target. I would be perfectly happy with this in a deck because, like, assuming I have a deck based around the idea of playing with Morph or whatever. Do keep in mind, this is whenever, when this creature is turned face up, do a thing. Exiling it and having it come back into play face up is not the same thing. When it's turned face up is from the effect of Morph or something similar. It has to specifically specify, turning it face up. Either, like, in the rule text for the ability on the card, or at least the reminder text, or in the rules for the actual ability doing it. If it comes face up from anything else, it's not the same thing. Blue cards. Warped Researcher. So this is a 5 mana 3/4 that will occasionally gain flying and shroud. I am less fond of this. Like, because you're looking at an uncommon, and at this point, Air Elemental was uncommon. So you're looking at 2 blue plus 3 for a 4/4 flyer. Versus 1 blue plus 4 for 3/4 that can occasionally get shroud and flying. And, unlike what you would get from, what was it? Where did I see it? Stoic Champion, got bigger, which is a thing that can stack. Yeah, I don't see anything else. Warped Researcher, it's like this is only going to be useful once, potentially twice a turn. But that's it. Stoic Researcher, because it's a size boost, you can use that turn after turn. Meh. Mistform Sea Swift. Back to the Mistforms. You get a 3/1 flyer for 4, which seemed to be par for the course at that point. It took them a while to actually get away from 3/1 flyer for 4. But this had 2 additional things going on. One, it had the Mistform ability. Pay 1, giving it the creature type of your choice to end a turn. Again, at that point, you give it the wall type or the legend type and things got awkward. That's no longer a thing. That's no longer a problem. You can make it a wall and it won't have defender natively. It also had Morph, which was fine. Because that meant it could actually, deal an extra point of damage in combat because it goes from a 2/2 to a 3/1. Or you have it 2/2 and cool, I'm attacking with flyers. Pay 2 mana, turn it face up, block. Ah, crap. But yeah, this was fine. But, I mean, realistically, you're you have better options. I would honestly, I would play Phantom Monster over this in almost any deck. Glintwing Evoker, Invoker, 5 mana. Honestly, this is the kind of card that my mono blue ramp deck actually legitimately considered. Where are you here? My creatures that ramp. Combo bets. Ramp into me. Basically use reasons to use excess mana. That's more mana. This is ways to dig 4 lands. Spot removal, some of which was expensive. Landfall. Yeah, I don't see anything here that uses. I know one of the cards I had for the deck that triggered the entire ability, like the entire deck idea. Triggered the entire deck idea was Sphinx of Magosi. It's like 3 blue plus 3 for 5/5 flying Sphinx, and it paid blue plus 2 colon, put +1 counter on it, and draw a card. If I remember that right. And very much the impetus for a deck like this. And this is also the sort of thing. You're paying 8 mana to give it flying, you're basically paying 2 mana to give it +1/+1 till end of turn, which is not completely unreasonable. And flying, and then another 2 to give it flying, but you have to pay the 2 for flying every time. Or you could just say you give, 3 mana, it gives +1/+1 on flying till end of turn, because that's close enough. Blue +7 versus, which is 8 mana, versus 9 generic mana. Close enough. But yeah, 3 mana, give +1/+1 flying till end of turn. Is kind of what you're looking at here. And yeah, this is very much the sort of card that I would put depending on how I built my ramp deck. I more went with landfall, but if I didn't go landfall, something like this would fit easily enough. So if you are going for something a little off the wall and going, a rampy kind of blue deck, because it is buildable. I have enough cards in here. Pillapala is there to combo with Grand Architect, and you end up with infinite mana. Pay a blue to make this into a blue creature to end a turn. Tap this to get 2 colorless. Tap Pillapala to get 2 colorless. Spend the 2 colorless and untap it to get a mana of any color, which in this case is going to be blue. The Pillapala is now untapped. This is not restricted on how often you can do it. Just tap it again, spend the 2 mana and untap it to get a mana, and just go off. This converts blue into triple colorless. This fetches basics out of your deck. This is probably the first one to actually get replaced if I can find something that fits. This fetches basics out of my deck. This is basically Harrow. 0-2, this is basically Birds of Paradise on a 0-2 flyer. Like a slightly buffier Birds of Paradise. The Scampering Surveyor and Solemn Simulacrum are there for the same ability, i.e. the first thing. Silver Mirror is there to, again, it taps for blue. Stuff that's there specifically to ramp into. Combo bits. Decimator Web combos with the Karn's Bastion that's in the mana base. Leyline Singularity combos with the Mirror Box. Well of Lost Dreams combos with the Life Tap, which combos with the Yavimaya Cradle of Growth that's in the mana base. So you end up gaining a bunch of life, and then you can spend that. Then you can spend some of that to draw extra cards. I figured that was an appropriate way to draw cards in a blue deck that was trying not to play like a blue deck. Rituals storage. This is all here just to generate extra mana. Dig for lands. These guys are there specifically to fetch lands out of my deck. My talk manipulation. I'm running like at least 18 islands. So my talk manipulation, the chance of not, look at the top 7 cards. You may put one of those cards onto the battlefield if it has the same name as a permanent. Chances are I have an island in play when I cast this. I'll probably hit another one. This is probably going to be Untamed Wilds. Navigation Orb. Fetch 2 basics. This is a more expensive Cultivate. This allows me to sacrifice, like for 2 blue, I can sacrifice, let's say, Solemn Simulacrum, draw a card when it, before this ability resolves, and get an artifact land. Search for Scanta will become a land. Star of Hearth and Home, when I hit someone, I fetch a basic. Sword of the Animus, when I hit someone, when I attack, I fetch a basic. Tezzeret, I -0 to fetch a basic, or I -1 to fetch Wayfarer's Bauble, etc., etc. Treasure Mage. Treasure Mage is there to look for some of the big beasties, I think. I don't remember what big beasties I have to search up. Trinket Mage fetches artifact lands. No, that's not supposed to be Treasure Mage. That's supposed to be the one for the 2 drops. Trinket, Treasure, Trophy. I forget what it is. But there's one that fetches 2 drops. Wayfarer's Bauble is basically a slightly more expensive Rampant Growth. War of Invention. I pay 3, I search up an artifact land. Spot Removal. Much of which is expensive on purpose. Well, I shouldn't say much, but Colossal Whale. Eats my opponent's creatures until the whale leaves. Phyrexian Ingester exiles one of my opponent's creatures and then gets bigger based on how big that creature is. Imprison the Moon completely shuts down a card and just turns it into basically wastes. Raven Form and Resculpt, two of my favorite mono blue removal spells because they exile an artifact or creature. Sure, you get this, you get this thing to replace it, but you don't get what you had before. A lot of these have got landfall of some sort or work with landfall. Crucible of Worlds, for example, lets me replay my lands. And then some of these get bigger till end of turn or can attack as though they didn't have Defender or do something else that care about, whenever one of my lands enter, I do a thing. Mass removal. I try very hard to find a way to go, hey, by the way, pop goes the world to stuff that's, I want to blow up the world, but actually blow up the world. Oh yeah, there's Sphinx Magosi. Yeah. Sorry, it's a 6/6 flyer, not a 5/5. Non-land permanents you control are artifacts in addition to their... True is for permanent spells and non-land permanent cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. So Encroaching Mycosynth will turn around and allow me to use some... will allow me to use Treasure Mage to fetch up like some of my big threats because suddenly they're artifacts. It's not what I was looking for, but it works. Nadir Kraken, whenever I draw a card, I can pay 1 to put a counter on this, like a +1 counter on it, and make an extra body. This is very much something that feels green to me. Except it's triggered on drawing a card. Endless Evil. Endless Evil I want on like Scampering Surveyor or Scampering Surveyor or Solemn Simulacrum. So I consistently get the come into playability and I keep getting lanes out of my deck. Yeah, here's Sphinx Magosi. Draws cards, not the part I care about. Then put a +1 counter on Sphinx Magosi. The 5 artifact lands that at that point I could play. There might be more now. 32 other lands, including 19 basic islands. There's the Karn's Bastion I mentioned earlier. There's the Yavimaya I mentioned earlier. This allows me in my opinion, an acceptable way to draw cards in a mono blue deck that's trying not to play mono blue. Same here. And then like a couple extra like rampy stuff. You know, your Everflowing Chalice, your Sapphire Medallion, your Soul Ring, etc. Anywho. A deck, like I was saying, a deck like that, I have Sphinx Mogosi. If I'm looking for more cards that do something similar to that, Glintwing Invoker fits. So a whole lot of rambling about A, one of my decks, and B, why I want to put a card in. Mistform Wakecaster. So it's a 2/3 flyer, which again feels a bit overcosted because realistically, like a 3/3 flyer, you're looking at like 4 mana or thereabouts. I could see 4 mana begrudgingly for a 2/3 flyer at that point. uh, the misform ability. The second ability is interesting. Or sorry, the second activated ability, I should say, is interesting. 2 blue plus 2, tap. Choose a creature type. Each creature you control becomes that type until end of turn. Again, this is one of those cards that I would not be upset if I saw somebody play it. I would not expect it. But some decks really want specific creature types. Slivers is a great example. If you're playing against a sliver deck and you've got like a bunch of like random jank, you play this and you go, okay, cool. All my creatures are now slivers till end of turn. So half of your stuff will also affect my stuff. Wait, what? Yeah, that now affects me, that now affects me, that now affects me, that now affects me. Oh no. Oh yeah. Uh a lot of older cards said, block creatures and not block creatures that you controlled. So, for example, Goblin King affected all goblins, not all goblins that you controlled. Misform Waitcaster can make use of that. Covert Operative. Felt a bit expensive at first. It took me a really long time to realize that this is 5 mana that's going to get in for 3 damage turn after turn after turn. Because this is better than a 5 mana for a 3/2 flyer. Which is, again, a little on the expensive side. I could begrudgingly see 4 mana for a 3/2 flyer. I don't like it, but I can kind of wrap my brain around it. This is unblockable. This you cannot block, regardless of what you have. With the rare exception of things that specifically say they work on the unblockable. Does Whip Fine work? No, not Whip Fine. Choking Vines. X target attacking creatures become blocked. Choking Vines deals 1 damage to each of those creatures. This spell works on creatures that can't be blocked. Crazy, crazy card. Oh, you're unblockable? That's nice. I just need to be able to target you. What? I just need to be able to target you. Covert Operative. But yes, barring effects like that, which are incredibly rare, even though that one was printed at common, you pretty much never see them. Yeah, it's going to get through for 3 damage every single turn. You could have, like, Emrakul the Eon's Torn. Okay, I'm getting through for 3. Getting through for 3. I don't care how big your creature is. Getting through for 3. Getting through for 3. I watched last week's Commander Clash earlier today. And I think it was Seth had a 40-odd power and toughness Mondrak that was he was about to get swords to he was going to die. He was about to swords to plowshares it so he could gain enough life so he could be comfortably back at a healthy life total. And it got countered with Tybalt's trickery and replaced with an arcane signet. That was hilarious. Yeah, you're not getting swords to plowshares, you're getting arcane signet instead. Oh. Yeah, this is going to get through for damage every single turn. It's only 3 damage for 5 mana, but it's going to get through. And so as a result, this is also going to eat planeswalkers for dinner. You throw any sort of actual buff spell on it. Let's see if I can find it real quick. That one. I have some on here. Bodies. One with the wind works well. Psychic impetus, maybe you can get away with. Spectral flight is another one with the wind. Tricks of the trade is redundant at that point. But yeah, you're just if you can find a way to give it vigilance, throw leaden fists on. Yeah, covert operative. You want a cheap threat that can deal with a bunch of stuff, or just get through for damage turn after turn. Stuff that's unblockable does a lot. Jump on sorcerer, one of the least interesting jump palms. In fact, Gem Palm Avenger. Soldiers get +1/+1 first strike till end of turn. You're going to want that in a soldier deck. Gem Palm Incinerator deals X damage to target creature where X is the number of goblins on the battlefield. So both sides. And chances are that's going to be a lot. So that's going to kill a thing. You're going to want that in a goblin deck. Gem Palm Polluter. Nuke a player's life total based on how many zombies are in play. That's going to be a fair amount. Gem Palm Strider is going to give elves +2/+2 till end of turn. That's going to be, you're going to want that in an elf deck. Gem Palm Sorcerer, wizards gain flying till end of turn. All the other 4 are like really good. Then the one for wizards is just fine. It's not. It won't have a home. It's just not interesting. If you really want to give your wizards flying, there's easier ways to do that. Levitation, Wonder in your graveyard with an island in play, Archetype of Imagination, so on and so forth. There's enough ways to give your stuff flying. It's not hard. And straight up, it's a 3 mana 3/2. A 3 mana 2/2, which at that point was on par with what blue got. Keen Eye Aven, 1 blue +3 for a 2/3 flyer that cycles for 2. Again, you take off the cycling, this is a 3/3 or maybe a 2/4. It's common, so that makes sense. Probably a 2/4. Knock off a point of toughness, give it cycling a 2. Okay. In a bird soldier deck, it's fine. It's a role player basically. Or sorry, let me rephrase that. It's a curve filler. If you don't have enough decent, 4 mana cards, it's serviceable and you can always cycle it later for an extra card. But you're not thrilled to play it. Fugitive Wizard, don't play it. Even if you're playing with commons, 1 mana for a 1/1 with no abilities. Are you building mono blue common wizards? Type wizard, ID equal blue, now value 1. Rarity common. 22 options. Better card, better card, better card. Drifter, debatable. I would play that, I would play that, that's the Fugitive Wizard that we're talking about. Grixis Illusionist, potentially, might be a thing. Hapless Researcher would play that instead because it's got a use. This can screw over some people. This can be sudden oops counterspell. Merfolk Secret Keeper, yes. Rootwire Mystic. Sage of Aperture, Sadistes Faithful. Yeah, like everything I see here. I don't think I see any card that, like, there's 22 options. I would play anything else. I would play everything else before I played Fugitive Wizard. Oh, minus Stream of Consciousness because that's not actually a creature. Treble Instant Wizard. But it's going to do what you're looking for in a wizard deck. Don't play Fugitive Wizard. That's like making it your 102nd card in a commander deck. Don't do it. Not worth it. Riptide Mangler. Again, this is the kind of card that I really should put into my mono blue ramp deck. Change this creature's base power to target creature's power. This effect lasts indefinitely. It's 2 mana for 0/3, which is not horror bad. It's not amazing, but it's not horror bad. But 2 mana. Change this creature's base power. So overwrite the 0 with target creature's power. Not target creature's base power. Target creature's power. So in other words, if something is like a natively a 3/3, but it's a 7/7 till end of turn, this now has a base of 7. I really should throw this in my deck. Where is Notepad++? This one? Nope. This one. Riptide Mangler. Legions. Thermoplasm. When this creature is turned face up, you may put... So this is a 3 mana 1/1 flyer, which overcosted there, with a morph of 2 blue +2. But when it's turned face up, you may put a creature card with a morph ability from your hand onto the battlefield face up. If you do, return this creature to its owner's hand. The problem there is that the creature that you're putting into play doesn't get any turn face up abilities. It's going to be its normal version. So, for example, you could get the Sea Swift as a 3/1 flyer. However, morph can be done at any time you've got priority. Anytime you have the opportunity to cast a spell or activate an ability, you can do this. Which means that, like, you can do this in the middle of combat. You can do this in response to something else being cast. The only restriction is that the card you're putting into play has to have morph. Megamorph does count. It does allow you to do things like take a Chroma Angel of Fury and suddenly drop it in play. You know, there are uses for it. This is a card that, even though it's in your 99, you have to build around it. You have to build knowing it's in your deck. Even Envoy, this is Ornithopter that has a colored mana cost. And its colored mana cost is blue. Here's the silly thing. This feels right to me for what Ornithopter should cast, but Ornithopter already exists. Do you know how weird that is? This came out in 1990, or sorry, this came out in 2003. Ornithopter had already existed for a decade. And you take a look at this and you go, why? If this came first, people would look at this and go, okay, yeah, that feels about right. The biggest hiccup people have with Ornithopter is because it has 0 power. It can't do anything on its own. It needs some kind of buff of some sort. But it's a 0/2 flyer, which averages to a 1/1 flyer, which probably should be about 1.5, maybe 2 mana, when you look at the fact that it's an artifact creature and therefore can go into any deck. And when I say probably 1.5 to 2 mana, we're talking based on the logic from back then. So a single colored mana makes sense. Nowadays, you might make specifically like 1 mana, but 1 colorless, like 1 specifically colorless mana. Something that you can cast off of Soul Ring, but not off of, forest or mountain or plains around or swamp. And this feels like the right cost, but Ornithopter came first, and so suddenly people are like, why? Why are you wasting my time? Why are you wasting my cardboard? But this feels like the right cost. Misformed Sliver is 20 cents because it's a sliver. It's a common, but it's 20 cents because it's a sliver. 1 blue, 1 other for a 1/1. That gives Here's the funny thing. If you look at the mistform creatures, these become the creature type of your choice till end of turn. Mistform Sliver, this permanent becomes the creature type of your choice in addition to its other types until end of turn. So it's still a sliver, but now it's also something else. And so suddenly it still gets all the buffs from being a sliver and whatever else. So that is going to end up being, if you're playing with slivers, that can end up being a bit stronger than it first appears. Again, due to the same kind of reasoning as the white caster. If you're playing with slivers and somebody's playing with any number of older Lord effects, Goblin King, Lord of Atlantis, stuff of that nature, that says all creatures of the given type and not all creatures you control of the given type, Mistform Sliver is going to get those bonuses as well. Or Mistform Sliver is going to allow those other slivers. It's going to allow your slivers to gain all those excess bonuses. Let's go black. Baby, come black. What? So, Feather Flock. 5 mana for a 3/2 flyer with Morph. Not worth it. Again, 4 mana. 4 mana for a 3/2 flyer in black, I could see. Because black had trouble getting, like, unless you're looking at higher rarity stuff, black had trouble with, like, good. What am I looking for? I can't think. Right. If you're looking at higher rarity stuff, you can start getting flying at a reasonable price. But if you're looking at lower rarity stuff, it's hard to get a good, at least at this point, which is part of what made Nighthawk, Vampire Nighthawk, so good. It was 2 black plus 1 for 2/3 with flying, death touch, and lifelink. It just did so much. A 3/2 flying for 5 mana with a morph of 4. No, don't bother. Dripping Dead. 6 mana for 4/1 that can't block. Ouch. Really ouch. But whenever it deals combat damage to a player, destroy that creature. It can't be regenerated. Not quite death touch because it has to be combat damage. But this is one of those situations where, if you compare it to, where are you? If you compare it to the Lowland Tracker, you want to get that death touch. You want to give the Dripping Dead first strike now. And if you give this first strike, you're either hitting for 4 or you're killing whatever it bumps into. You know, even if the other thing has also got death touch, forget it. Yeah, just it dies. Dripping Dead, worth at least looking at. You'll probably end up passing on it, but worth at least looking at. Embalmed Brawler. Again, going back to the Amplify thing, It's a 3-drop, so you'll probably have at least 2 zombies in your hand. At which point you're looking at a 4/4 for 3 mana. Whenever this attacks or blocks, you lose 1 life for each +1 counter on it. Okay, so 3 mana for a 4/4 that whenever it tangles in combat, I lose 2 life. That's still not bad. And if you only reveal 1, no. I think I would do it at 2. I think 3 might be a bit much, but then it's also a 5/5. But then if I've got a way to give my zombies lifelink. Dreadhorde Invasion. Necromancer's Covenant. Zombies you control have lifelink. Okay. And Orzhov Zombies feels like a thing you could do. Yeah, okay. I can see my way around playing Embalm Brawler. Smoke Spew Invoker. Because this is trying to be removal, I really would only want to play this if I've either got a way to reduce its activation cost by a fair bit. Um, or I have a way to generate infinite mana. Now, to be fair, infinite mana in any color combination in Commander is not hard, and just being able to go and I create as much mana as I want, and everything gets -3/-3 on everybody else's side of the board, and they all die, and now I swing for lethal, and whatever. That's pretty easy. I think, personal opinion, I'd probably rather go the reduce the cost route, so I'd actually have to put some effort into it. That being said, you could play it, again, it is a common. You could take that route, at which point generating a bunch of mana is a lot more difficult. Oh, oh, Earthblighter. Oh, oh, um, um, Skirkridge Exhumer. 2 mana for 1/1. Pay a black, tap, and discard card. Make a make a token that's basically Festering Goblin. It's a 1/1 black zombie goblin that when it dies, target creature gets -1/-1 till end of turn. Earthblighter. 1 black +1 for a 1/1 human cleric. Pay a black +2, tap it, and sack a goblin, destroy target land. So between the two of them, pay 2 black +2, tap 2 creatures, and discard a card, destroy land, and give a creature -2/-2 till end of turn. The only thing you have to do is keep your hand full enough. You could throw Phyrexiarena in that mix, at which point you're gaining, you're drawing an extra card every turn and losing a life. but that's easy enough to deal with. Yeah, okay. Do you want to be blowing up another land every turn? Here you go. Have a nice 2-card combo. Costs a little bit, but you get to do this every single turn. You could try using... yeah, but I'm assuming you're playing block... Like, I'm assuming... Because I'm looking at Earthblighter. I'm assuming you're playing black, but you're not necessarily playing white. Oh, I see what you're saying. So you cast Armageddon first, and then you use Earthblighter to keep them empty. Okay. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I wouldn't want to be doing it that way. Like, I'm not the kind of person that, because I've had Armageddon played against me before, and in a competitive setting, I am perfectly fine with that. In a in a kitchen table kind of format, like Commander is advertised as being, where it's like, as I like to compare it, beer and pretzels magic, or beer and pizza magic, however you want to put it. People like to sit down, relax, and have a good time. If I can't play my cards because suddenly I don't have land and I'm not drawing them or whatever reason, I stop having fun. It is suddenly not an enjoyable experience anymore. Um and so my decks tend not to play cards like that. I want my I want my opponents to be able to have the ability to play the game. I don't necessarily want them to kick my ass, but I want them to still be able to feel like they can do something. I've had games where it's like, a 3-player game where 2 of them were just having mana issues, and I turned around and said, you know what? I am this far ahead of you. You guys are both having issues. Go through your deck, dig out, like, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 basic land, put them in play, shuffle. Let's get you guys to the point where you can actually play the game, because I could tell they were not enjoying themselves. Suddenly that made a huge difference. It's like, oh my god, I can actually do stuff now. But again, competitive environment, completely different scenario. You sit me down for a game, you sit me down at a legacy tournament, and I got like turn 2 Armageddons or something like that. I'm like, okay, so that's a thing that just happened. Okay, what can I do about this now? My mind works very different depending on what style of, you know, depending on the kind of game I'm expecting to have. So I don't mind, because the other thing is too, if you're looking at a combination of like Earthblighter and what is it called? Skirkridge Exhumer? Yeah, Skirkridge Exhumer. If you're looking at a combo like that, you're still only going to be able to do that like once every turn cycle. Unless you get extra untaps somehow. But then you still also have enough cards. You still have to have enough cards in your hand to, to consistently feed it. But you're probably looking at somebody that's got like enough utility lands. Like if you're targeting one person, it's like, okay, you have enough utility lands slash lands that tap for multiple mana we've got to slow you down. Helling Mine or Phyrexian Arena. Yeah, I mentioned the Phyrexian Arena before. Helling Mine, depending on the kind of deck, I occasionally prefer Font of Mythos. Um, I have a deck. Oh, again, I'll throw this in the chat again, which will bring you to this spreadsheet. And my mono white, whoops, wrong one. The Yumiji deck is basically every combo when I built it that I could think of that I could put into a mono white deck that like every combo that I could think of that I could jam into a mono white deck and no tutoring. And so for this specific deck, what I wanted was, let's see if I can find it here. I'm running Font of Mythos over Helling Mine because there's a couple of cards, Alms Collector being the big one, that specifically cares about if an opponent would draw 2 or more cards, i.e., it's looking for a single instruction that's asking them to draw 2 cards at the same time. So I got Font of Mythos, Otherworld Atlas, and your temple is under attack, and Secret Rendezvous. Font of Mythos and Otherworld Atlas more relevantly here to say, hey, by the way, draw more than one card at a time. But instead, they're going to draw a card and I'm going to draw a card. So, Otherworld Atlas, if I turn around, it's got, say, 2 counters on it. Tap. Each player draws 2 cards. Well, no. I'm going to draw 2 cards from my part of Otherworld Atlas, and I'm going to draw an additional card, and you get to draw only 1 card from you try to draw 2 cards off the Otherworld Atlas. So 4 cards are still being drawn, but I get 3 of them. I do have to try and find a way to break the game sometimes. But yeah, Earthblighter really wants to be in a deck that's got ways to get extra goblins. There's always a way. If you're adding red to it, that makes things easy because, you get to play with cards like Goblin Warrens, for example, where you can, you sack a goblin and, you pay 3 mana and sack 2 goblins to get 3, I think it is. Goblin Warrens. Yeah. Sack 2 goblins, create 3. Yeah. Yeah, Squeeze the Immortal or Squee Goblin Nabob. Although Squeeze the Immortal would work easier in this case. But if you're not playing red for whatever reason, and you want to be able to use this, this is why I brought up the Exhumer, was because it gave you a black way to consistently generate goblin tokens that you could then sack to the Earthblighter. Which also had the side benefit of going, hey, by the way, kill that other thing. Hey, that small guy over there, kill it. Etc., etc. So yeah, Earthblighter, there's ways to make it work. Depends on how much effort you want to put into it. Putting it in a black deck that's already running goblins, so at least, generally at least Rakdos, would be easier. Zombie Brute. Zombie Brute, the problem with Zombie Brute is you really want to do this for at least two to make it worth playing at all. Because, like, doing it for, like, having one zombie in your hand means you're looking at a 6/5 trample for 7 mana, which isn't awful, but it's not. It's our card that gives all creatures changeling. There's more than one. My typical go-to is this thing. It doesn't give them changeling. It doesn't give them changeling per se, but it gives them. It does the same thing. This is the, and I've mentioned previously in other in other videos. There's certain cards that I commonly use as like mental shortcuts. See if I can pull up my document here real quickly. It's this one. Just because it's not they're the only card that does what I'm looking for. It's just it's the first card I commonly think of that does X. Maskwood Nexus is one of those. If I'm looking for, I want to make everything into a sliver, let's say, because I have just enough stuff that isn't slivers in my deck for whatever reason. Maskwood Nexus fills that. You know, sometimes I just want it because it's a token generator. There's one deck that I have it in because it's a token generator that in this, you know, in the case of the deck in question, it makes druids. I don't care that they're also, you know, elk and rhinoceros and, you know, golems and everything else at the same time. I just care that they're also that they're druids. But common shortcuts that I end up looking at are like Akroma's Memorial. Often because I'm looking for things like Vigilance or Haste in colors that just don't get them. Like if I'm looking at if I'm looking at a mono black deck and I want to give all my creatures Vigilance, Akroma's Memorial is the quickest and easiest way I can think of immediately right off the top to give all my creatures Vigilance. If I'm looking to give all my blue creatures Haste, Akroma's Memorial just jumps out right up front and says, hey, by the way, all creatures have Haste. Similarly, Eldrazi Monument, giving all my creatures indestructible. Chain Reaction, Star of Extinction, or Blasphemous Act as a board wipe that's based on dealing damage. So kind of like when we were talking last episode about Crypt Rats, same idea. If I'm thinking black, my common shortcut goes to Pestilence. But if I'm looking at just a general damage spell, my brain normally goes red, at which point it's commonly Chain Reaction is usually the first one that jumps out. Basilisk Collar, first card that comes to mind that gives Death Touch. There's other stuff as well. It's commonly the most popular one, but there's other cards that can do it. Mirror Entity for a creature that has or can grant all creature types. If I'm not looking to grant all creature types, but I'm looking to grant a specific creature type, you can use like Mistform Wakecaster, for example, to do it till end of turn, and sometimes that's plenty. Desert Twister or Vindicate as something that blows up any permanent, and Mycosynth Lattice to make everything into artifacts. I recently found out there's a blue card. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. Um, that largely does the same thing. Where are you here? This one. Go away. Encroaching Mycosynth. Largely for my purposes does the same sort of thing as Mycosynth Lattice. But for something that can give everything all creature types, if it's not Masculine Nexus that's jumping out in my head, it's Mirror Entity. So there's like, what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh yeah, and uh, forcing all possible creatures to block a thing, Lure. Because I've been playing for over 30 years. Lure is just it's the OG. But there's like a dozen cards that I commonly use as like, I know I want a card kind of like this. There's probably other cards that do what I'm looking for. But sometimes there's not. If I'm building a blue deck and I want to give haste, I pretty much have to rely on a Chroma's Memorial. So sometimes you're stuck with it. Anyway, Zombie Brute. You know what? I don't think I'd be completely terribly upset if I only got one counter on it. I'd get a 6/5 trample for 7, which is not, I mean, I'm not thrilled by it, but it is a 6/5 trample. That only cost me a single black, which is also relevant. I think I'd be kind of okay with that. I really wanted at least 2 counters on it. That being said, you also got to play with stuff like proliferate and whatever else. If you're running green, it starts getting out of hand really fast because even with Winding Constrictor and whatnot, this can actually get fairly big fairly quickly. So, yeah, Zombie Brute. I think if I plan on making Zombie Brute bigger than 2 counters, I really need a lot of zombies in the deck. I need to be able to draw cards regularly. Draw extra cards regularly. As Grace suggested in the chat, Howling Mine, and then, Howling Mine for Exium Arena, Fond of Mythos, effects of that nature, to get me extra cards regularly. And I want to run, I'm probably running closer to at least 40, I would say at least 40 zombies, possibly closer to 50 in my deck if I want to be able to make sure I can hit more than +2 counters. Or if I'm running less than that, I want proliferate and or some other way to give bonus counters. Oh yeah, Doubling Season's another one that comes to mind as a shortcut for usually giving bonus counters. One, two. Infernal Caretaker. If you are even considering playing Zombie Brute in your zombie deck, this is one of those non-zombies that you should be considering in your that you should strongly consider putting into your zombie deck. When it's turned face up, return all zombie cards from all graveyards to their owner's hands. First of all, play something that'll eat your opponent's graveyards. Realistically, unless you happen to go up against another zombie deck, you're only going to have like a handful to worry about. So something that can eat a card at a time would be perfectly fine. Honored Heirloom, one of my favorite cards for eating a card at a time. It's basically a manalith that you can pay 2 and tap it to eat target card from a graveyard. It's not the only way to do it. It's a way to do it, though. That being said, yeah, I would generally prefer something like Patriarch's Bidding, Living Death, Living End, something of that nature instead. This is still fine. Although, returning them back to your hand does also mean that if you're going to go do like the Zombie Brute thing, cool. I reveal 7 zombies. I now have a 12/11 trample. Ghastly Remains. Triple black zombie, amplify 1. So you have to reveal at least 1. At the beginning of your upkeep, if it's in your graveyard, you may pay triple black. If you do, return it to your hand. This is a sort of card that you can use just as like a card to consist. What we were saying a moment ago about Skirkridge Exhumer. This is a card that, I mean, yes, it's going to make things more expensive in the mana department because now instead of paying 4 mana every turn, you're paying 7 mana every turn. But this is a card that you consistently discard every single turn and not care. It doesn't have to have died, doesn't this, doesn't that, whatever. Plus, you are playing black. If you're playing this, you're playing with rares. You have access to all the weird shenanigans that black gets access to for a giant amount of mana. Like Cabal Coffers and Cabal Stronghold and Magus of the Coffers and Songs of the Damned and the whole 9 yards. Incidentally, the Spell Shaper type stuff, the Exhumer and the Earthblighter do not say only as a sorcery. You could do that on your upkeep. You can generate like 7 mana, return the Ghastly Remains back to your hand, discard it to make the token. Sack the token to the Earthblighter, and then draw for turn. Deathmark Prelate, 4 mana for 2/3. Based on its ability, I can kind of see that. But again, this is the sort of thing that you put into a zombie deck that it in and of itself is not a zombie. You don't want to overdo, like, here's the thing. If I'm running, say, 44 mana slots, which is what I commonly do, or what I commonly aim for, if I'm 44 mana slots, and I'm running 50 zombies, not counting my general, that only leaves about 5 slots left. So, a couple of my zombies are going to have to be some kind of removal in and of themselves. If I've got a zombie that does something like this, great. I'm probably running some kind of effect along lines of zombie infestation. Probably not zombie infestation itself, because that feels a bit redundant. You know, why am I discarding zombies to make zombies when I could just, you know, create zombies otherwise? But if I can get a zombie generating zombie, you know, kind of along lines of like the exhumer. Yeah, but this can just cool. I keep making more zombie tokens. Oh, whatchamacallit? Dreadhorde Invasion. That'll work. And, yeah, just sit there every turn and I'll sack the zombie army and blow up my, you know, start blowing up my opponent's stuff. Goblin Turncoat. Oh my god. Goblins won't betray their own kind for any price. They'll do it for a very specific price. Moto was great at making friends into shields. 2 mana for a 2/1, which felt about right back then. Sack a goblin to regenerate it. Again, look back to the exhumer. That gives you a black way to consistently make zombies. Not only can you regenerate this thing, which means, so regenerate will help something dying from being destroyed. Which includes lethal damage. Because lethal damage, according to the rules, destroys the creature. And a source with death touch, a single point of damage from a source with death touch is considered lethal damage. So regenerate will keep the creature from dying in the first place. By the way, I just noticed how the goblin in this, his face reminds me of the Joker from the Batman series. If you really have a reason, like, do you need a sack outlet for your goblins? Do you need a sack outlet in a goblin based in a goblin deck? So you have stuff like Viscera's Seer, which is just sack a creature, which is commonly a thing. It's just sacrifice a creature. Do you really need a card that says sacrifice a goblin specifically? Doesn't mean you can't. But I could actually see an argument for it. If somebody gains control of your turn and you want to be able to, you know, sacrifice, you want to be able to be protected from sacrificing, like for example, Vile Deacon here is a human cleric. It is not a zombie. If you run Viscera's Seer, the Vile Deacon can be sacrificed to that. If you run Goblin Turncoat, because it's not a goblin, you can't sacrifice the Deacon to the Turncoat because it's not a goblin. So, depending on the kind of people you're playing against, I can see an argument for it. That's more metagame call, and it's going to be harder to find stuff that does that. But, I mean, again, Goblin Warrens is a thing. And there's, is it Pashlik Mons? That's also got a similar ability? Pashlik Mons. Yeah. Sack a goblin to make goblin tokens. It's conceivable to run just enough goblins that you can do it. But you have to run like just enough non-goblins. It would require some juggling, but there's reasons. There's ways to do it. Speaking of Vile Deacon, are you playing clerics? Run this. Really, run this. If you run it by itself, it attacks as a 3/3, which is eh. If there's one more cleric on the, including changeling on the board, it attacks as a 4/4. If there's two, it attacks as a 5/5. And that's with only two others. Because notice that it's X is the number of clerics on the battlefield, not the number of other clerics. Again, back in the day, they commonly said the number of whatever on the battlefield, not the number of other or not the number that you control, just the number, period. So if you're playing a cleric deck, you want a relatively aggressive attacker. Vile Deacon is pretty good. A Phaedo Exterminator, you're looking at this instead of something like Last Gasp, but realistically, if you're looking at Last Gasp, you should be looking at Nowhere to Run to begin with, which is going to be a lot more powerful. You commonly also are not looking at -3/-3 being enough. Pardon me. So, Witch's Vengeance? Yeah, Witch's Vengeance. This might be. I don't know. I think if I'm considering the exterminate, like, I wouldn't be playing the. I think most decks I can conceive would not have a use for this. Hey, Gray, I try. No promises. I know you said you're Switzerland, so you are. Let me think here. For was it like 2:30 in the morning or something like that? 1:30, 2:30 in the morning. I feel like 2:30. I think not GMT. I think UTC is is almost 12:30 now. Um, yeah, Federal Exterminator. If I'm giving something -3/-3, I want something that'll actually kill a thing. And realistically, the number one card that you want for that kind of slot, in my opinion, is actually like Bane of the Living instead. To just kill a bunch of stuff instead. Probably the more likely, slot for that. Red cards. Let me think here. 2.5 hours, 150 minutes, 50, 50 and 50 is 100, which is a little over an hour and a half. So theoretically should be done by about 10. Okay. Skirk Outrider. Again, what I said earlier about the Cloud Reach Cavalry being a 3/3 flyer really easily. You just need to have a bird, which is really easy to pull off. Skirk Outrider, you're looking at a 4/4 trample for 4, as long as you control a beast, which again, not difficult to pull off. But as we were looking at last time, at 4 mana at common these days, well, at 5 mana, you can get better than a 4/4. Can I get a 4/4 trample or better? ID equal red, mana value equal 4, mana 3, rarity common, power greater than 3, toughness greater than 3. Can't block unless you control Goblin or Orc. And I said common? Yes, I said common. Olagai Crusher. So you can get a 4/4 trample that can't block unless you control Goblin or Orc. That should be relatively easy. Okay. So for the exact cost and rarity of Skirk Outrider, getting a 4/4 trample is not easy. Olagai Crusher out of Lord of the Rings is the closest. Oh man. If this was also a beast somehow. But yeah. Not, like, again, beast, one of those creature types that should be relatively easy to pull off, just incidentally. Order EDH rec. Okay, I can see some of these. I can see some of these being played. Like it's saying the order to get played in, but it's like anyway. Skirk Outriders should be a lot easier to pull off than it appears. Frenetic Raptor. If it's the only beast in your deck, you're looking at 6 mana 6/6 that can't block. If there's more, that's a drawback. I I would play the Outrider before I played the Raptor. Unstable Hulk. So this you pretty much want to use as a finisher, ideally. Although hilariously, oh wow. If you can generate infinite mana and keep putting turn trigger creature. I can see a way to pull it off. Master of the Veil. No. Vesuvian Shapeshifter. As it enters or is turned face up. Damn it. You have to wait till your next turn. Man, that's hard to pull up. Because what I really wanted. Oh! Ixodron. As it enters, turn other Ixodron. And Ixodor. I want sort by color. Oh. When it enters, turn any number target tab creature. Let's turn face up. Huh. Short Crasher Elemental. If I can give... Wall of Deceit, Short Crasher Elemental. Obscuring Ether. So what I want is a way to turn a creature face. To turn a creature... Oh! Illusionary Mask. If I can return it back to my hand somehow. Like, if I can basically generate infinite mana. Unstable Hulk plus Illusionary Mask plus some way to regularly return it back to my hand. Means I can skip an infinite number of turns. That's adorable. Okay. So, I know. Why would I want to do that? If I go to my mono white deck, if I go to this one, a while ago, I saw this. Again, I don't like YouTube shorts, but I saw the title for one and I'm like, okay, I have to click on this, see what the heck is going on. And it was titled something like, "The only way to win is not to play the game." So I looked to see what was going on. And it was a combo that, for all intents and purposes, you could do in mono white. And was based around this guy. Chrono Savant. If it's in your graveyard, you can pay white +1 to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and skip your next turn. There's no restriction on the timing for this at all. So you can activate it, and then in response activate it, and in response activate it, and activate it, say, over 9,000 times. And then when it tries to, when they all try to resolve, there's no targets, so it'll just simply do as much as it can. So the first time, it'll bring Chronos Event back to turn, or back into play. It'll return it back to play tapped. and you skip your next turn. The next one, it's already back in play, but there's no targeting or anything, so it skips that part because it can't return something that's already there, but you skip your next turn. And the next one does the same thing, and you skip your next turn, and all the way down through the chain. So you skip like 9,000 turns, and you've got a tap Chrono Savant. So you use doubling cube relevantly. You put, say, 10 mana, let's say, in your mana pool. Some amount of it is white. Let's say 5 white and 5 colorless. Use 3 of the colorless, so you've got 7 mana left. You tap the doubling cube, and you double the amount of mana in your mana pool. Well, now you'll go to 10 white mana, and because you had 5 white, so now you're 5, and 5 becomes 10. You have 2 colorless left over. You double that to 4, so you got 14 mana left, of which is 10 and 4. You've just netted yourself 4 mana. Well, if you do it again, I spend 3 of it. So my 14 mana, knock off 3, goes down to 11, but doubles to 22. 22 minus 3 is 19. But this taps every activation. You need a way to untap it. So Karn is there. Whoops. Boop. Karn is there. Ignore this price thing. Once it loads up a pricing for one card, I use the same pricing for all cards. Karn is there to animate an artifact. You know, +1 till your next turn, up to 1 target non-creature artifact, in this case doubling cube, becomes an artifact creature, power and toughness each equal to its converted mana cost. Its mana value. How big it is, I don't care. Relevantly, it becomes an artifact creature. Toy Maker. Pay 1, tap and discard card. Target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature. Yada yada yada. Alright, so you only need to activate it once. And then you've got Voltaic Construct that allows you to untap an artifact creature. So you animate the doubling cube, and then you use Voltaic Construct to turn it into an artifact creature. Or sorry, you animate doubling cube, it's now an artifact creature. Use Voltaic Construct to untap it. So now each time through the loop is going to cost you 5. So you start off with 10 mana. Okay. Whoops. You start off with 10 mana. Theoretically. I don't remember how much you need to start off with to be able to go infinite, but let's say you start off with 10. You pay 3 and tap the cube. So 10 minus 3 goes to 7. Doubles to 14. You use 2 of that 14 to untap the cube. That brings you to 12. Use 3 of that 12 to go to 9. Tapping the cube. When the cube resolves, that puts you from 9 to 18. You spend 2 to untap. Brings you back to 16. Minus 3 is 13. doubles to 26. So let's see if I can make a... Okay. Let's do this. Oh, my dog. Oh, my dog. All right. I have to hide this for a moment. Oh. Blah, blah, blah. That. What? Settings. Go to that. Oh, that. Okay. Back to that. Okay. Grumble, grumble, grumble. Where was I? Here. All right. So. That minus 3 equals 2 times that. and then untap cube equals that minus 2. Let me make sure this is right. Activate cube, double tap. Alright, so let's assume we start off with 7. 7 does not work. 7 you die. 8 breaks even. So you need at least 9. Okay. Because if you start off with 8, if you activate the cube, that costs you 3. So that brings you down to 5. Cube resolves, that doubles it to 10. But then it costs you 2 to untap the cube. That brings you back to 8, which means you start over right here. So at 9, activating cube is 6. You know, activating the cube costs you 3. The cube resolves, doubles it to 12. 2 to untap the cube brings you to 10, which brings you... Alright, so U minus U. No. Ah. So how much? So the first iteration is going to be how much over 8 it is. So this should be 10. And then each iteration just doubles the previous net. Okay. Cool. That is good to know. So 50 should be 42. And then just keep doubling it. Alright. Wow. That explodes really quickly. Again, good to know. Oh, that's what that is. Anyway. So this combo allows you to... This combo here, so any sort of animating ability, doubling cube, and voltaic construct, will allow you to generate infinite mana as long as you have more than 8 mana start. If you have more than 8 mana started off, you will generate infinite mana. And then Chrono Savant is just a way to use it. What you want with Unstable Hulk. Oh yeah, and so what you were doing with Chrono Savant, you're skipping an infinite number of turns. But you have to keep yourself alive for that infinite number of turns. Whoops. You have to keep yourself alive for all that. So, relevantly here, you'll be looking at a card like Teferi's Protection to keep yourself alive. Because this lasts until your next turn. If you skip 9,000, 9,999 turns, then your next turn isn't going to be until the rest of the people are done. And then, there's other protection in here as well. And that's and then you get things like Myrel, Shield of Argive, and potentially Grand Abolisher, both available to make sure that your opponents can't interact with you while you're trying to do stuff. This is also why you've got, for example, Icecrown Scepter and Silence. You want to imprint Silence on Icecrown Scepter so that, at the beginning of your upkeep or like on your draw step, you activate Icecrown Scepter and cast Silence so people can't interact with you. So this is basically just a second form of Myrel. And this allows you to do your combo shenanigans and not get interrupted. And you just go from there. You generate infinite amount of mana. You skip an infinite number of turns. And eventually, your way of winning the game is waiting until the rest of the game is done and everybody's killed, and then you come back and it's like, oh cool. Well, now that your deck is pretty much dead, unless your opponents also found a way to not die from deck death, because if you're skipping, 10,000 turns, they're probably going to have drawn 10,000 cards and you'll basically win through milling. Unstable Hulk, generating infinite mana is not actually hard, but you get that combo as a starting point. There's other ways to do it as well, but there's that, that's a starting point, and all you need to do is, so this is 5, 6, 7, 8. For 8 mana, you get this. And the relevant part is you skip your next turn. And if so, 8 mana, skip your next turn. Generate an infinite amount of mana. Just simply get the Unstable Hulk returned back to your hand every turn. That can't be that difficult. I don't know. That's one I'd have to look into. But the theory exists. I'm sure there's a way to pull that off. Basically, doing my mono white multi-ball stack and using Unstable Hulk as your Chrono Savant there. Bloodstoke Howler. When it's turn face up, beast creatures you control get +3/+0 till end of turn. To be fair, that's a pretty strong, one-shot buff, but it is a one-shot buff. And I would rather this be like, you know, uh, you know, give me a sec here. This is getting annoying. Anyway, I mean, I would rather this be an actual Beast Lord. To be fair, though, it is also common, so having a Beast Lord at common is really hard to pin down. Uh, I think the only lords I can think of that actually legitimately exist at common, if you want to call them such, are slivers. They're usually like 2 mana 1/1s that give all slivers +1/+1, or all slivers you control +1/+1. Lords usually give like a buff and some ability. The ability that slivers get is, hey, we apply to all your guys. Anyway, um, again, it's fine. I honestly, I'd be more apt to find a home for the Outrider and the Hulk before the other two. Goblin Firebug. Back in the day, I thought this was actually pretty decent because it was really hard to find a 2 mana 2/2. Damn it. Missed. It was you couldn't actually get a 2 mana 2/2 in red unless it was like rare or mythic or something. Actually, mythic didn't exist yet. It was really hard to get a 2 mana 2/2 without it being at least rare. Without some kind of drawback attached. And this felt like the most reasonable drawback I'd seen. I was actually pretty happy with this because if you've got like, let's say you got 4 of these in play. Well, first of all, when it leaves, you sack land. You probably don't have enough land for them all. Second of all, if you've got 4 of these in play, then you drop something like Goblin King. And I'm not assuming you're going to hit 4. Hitting 2 is probably more reasonable. But then you drop like Goblin King or something equivalent. And yeah, fine, I lose land. But my curve is going to be relatively low. I'm not that worried about it. The problem is that nowadays, instead of this, now you've got like we I keep doing that. Now you've got this guy, which is a 1 mana 1/2. So as long as you control an artifact, +1/+0 and has haste, you cast this off something like Great Furnace. And you've got a creature that's the same size with haste that you're casting on turn 1 and already smacking compared to Goblin Firebug, which costs twice as much. And here's the thing. Here's the other thing. It's when it leaves the battlefield. It's not when it dies. If it gets exiled, if it gets returned to hand, whatever, you're losing land. Which, again, not terrible bad, all things considered. But compared to the Goblin Tomb Raider, which is like half the cost, and it gets bonuses instead, the Firebug's kind of been kicked to the curb. Now, that being said, if your deck wants your lands to go to the graveyard, you're playing, what's her face? Titania, I think it is. Um, but might it be Lord Windgrace I'm thinking of? Lord Windgrace. You may put on. When it enters or attacks, you may put a land card from a graveyard on the battlefield tapped under your control. Discard land, gain 3 life. Okay, Soul of Windgrace I could see. Soul of Windgrace I could see being used. And then Goblin Firebug. You know, you're playing Jund. Then Goblin Firebug makes a bit more sense. Crescent Craghorn. This is the sort of card where instead of haste, I wish it had trample. Actually, I really wish it had both. Because haste and then provoke. I come into play, I'm attacking, you're having to block me. I guess that's kind of like 4 damage to target creature. Which explains the 1 point of toughness if you're looking at it from that direction. But if it's 4 damage target creature, I wouldn't pay 5 mana for it. That being said, it is theoretically possible it can survive. But, yeah, no, just... As far as I'm concerned, this goes further down the list. The Hulk and the Firebug. The Hulk, the Firebug, and the Outrider are winning so far. Shaleskin Plower. When it's turned face up, destroy target land. So you get a 3/2 with base for the 3 mana, the 3 face down mana, and then 5 mana gets you basically an uncounterable Stone Rain. I'm kind of okay with that based on those costs. Is this what... Again, this is the kind of card that I want to be able to, return back to... Oh no. If you're generating infinite mana and you've got a way to bounce stuff back to your hand consistently, like multiple times, like as many times as you want during the same turn. Yeah. You build your own Armageddon that way. That could be dangerous. But yeah, it's fine. I think if you're playing with morphs and you're playing red, I think this is fine to include. There's often going to be like one land you really want to do, like somebody's Maze of Us, for example. Goblin Dynamo. I originally saw this and I'm like, you're looking at 7 mana for 4/4 that taps to do a point of damage. You compare that to Prodigal Sorcerer, which was like 3 mana for a 1/1, which eventually got turned into Prodigal Pyromancer. 3 mana for a 1/1 that pinged for a point of damage, so plus 2 mana. But 1 mana for a 1/1 creature versus 5 mana for a 4/4 creature. So, +1 for pinging for a damage. Or sorry, +2 for ping for a damage. Puts you about right. And a slightly more difficult cost to basically give you an instant blaze. You lose the dynamo because it blows up in his face. But X damage to any target. If you can generate a silly amount of mana, and there's ways to do it, believe me, there's ways to do it. Not only was there the combo that I showed you earlier, there's also aggressive assault. Sword of Feast and Famine. That's the one I'm thinking of. So this, in combination with, because whenever a quick creature deals combat damage to a player, that's the key here. You have to deal combat damage to a player. However, they don't have to actually take damage. Like their life, let me rephrase that. Their life total doesn't have to actually change. You just have to be able to deal combat damage to them. Wait, what? Yeah, they could have like him, they could have Solemnity plus 9 lives in play, or Solemnity plus Phyrexian Unlife in play. So they never take damage. Like the damage is assigned, their life total doesn't change. Or they could have Platinum Empyrean. But whenever you get that player does, and you untap all lands you control. That's the relevant line here. You untap all lands you control. Okay. Add. Aggravated Assault. 5 mana. Untap all creatures you control. After this main phase, there's an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. Activate only as a sorcery. You put those two together, you get infinite combats. However, if you start off with 6 mana, you're going to have a mana left over. If you start off with 7, wait, if you start off with 7, Gemstone Array. For that extra 2 mana, you put a charge counter on this. And then, every time you remove a charge counter, you get a mana of any color. So, basically, every 2 mana you put into it becomes a mana of any color. But this stores it. So you need 5 plus enough to put 1 more into the array. Well, you do that enough, you end up generating enough, you generate infinite mana. You can go Goblin Dynamo, sack it, and regardless of what somebody's life total is, you can blow them up. So if you've got some kind of infinite mana combo, Goblin Dynamo does give you a one-shot way, and you're playing red. Getting haste should not be hard. Goblin Dynamo does give you a way to pop goes the world, uh, kill off a player. Ridgetop Raptor. I think this was the first instance of double strike. Was in Legions. Um, yeah, Ridgetop Raptor. This was the first set to give us double strike. What? This was the first set to give us double strike. And so what you commonly see from this is like a 4 mana 2/1 with double strike. The common way to think about this is not counting any pumps. Looking at the creature straight up. And it's a 4 mana 4/1, which seems meh. Nowadays, you should be able to do that for 3, maybe even 2 mana. But now add any sort of pump. You know, uh, anything that gives your beasts +1/+1, or your red creatures +1/+1, or your dinosaurs +1/+1, or you know, target creature gets +3/+0 to or +2. Attacking creatures you control get +2/+0 till end of turn. Any sort of pump at all, and this starts going off the rails. If you're building around double strike, and the funny thing is, this was originally in Leech as an uncommon, then they shifted it over, they reprinted it in Dominaria Reunited as a common. I think I think this is actually an okay creature. It's not going to win any prizes, but I think it's reasonable. Uh, Maze Tail Histrodon. I always felt like this was overcosted. Cycles for 3, which to be fair, red drawing extra cards is not cheap. You got a 4/4 with first strike and haste for 7 mana. But it's first strike and haste. Realistically, you're looking at 5 mana ish for a 4/4, not unreasonably. Um, Actually getting an actual 4/4, I think we looked at that earlier. It's kind of difficult. But for 5 mana, you can get a 5/5 or there at least a 5/4 or 4/5 fairly easily these days. But that's for 5. This is 7. For the extra 2 mana, you're getting first strike and haste. Stat wise, like the cost feels right. It just feels too much. If that makes sense. But also look at the fact that we're looking at a common, so that probably I would assume if this was a higher rarity, this would cost like one or two mana less. So, um, I think like 5 mana for 4/4 haste probably feels right. An extra mana for first strike and an extra mana for cycling basically is what I see it boiling down to. The goblins tracked the Histrodon with much stealth and cunning. Then they were eaten with much pain and yelling. Yeah, sounds about right. Um, Although first strike and haste is it is a fun combination. It's like I'm gonna get through for damage. Something's gonna die, and it's probably something. I'm casting this. Something is probably going to die, and it's probably not what I'm casting. I don't know. I think if you're playing Beast Tribal, you want it. Don't play it because it's got cycling. If you're looking at stuff that's got first strike and haste combined, you might want it. To me, this is a tough sell. I'm seeing like 4 cards I would probably play before it. Skirk Marauder. Again, we are looking at cards that, we're trying to emulate spells, instants and sorceries. So here is a uncounterable shock. It's 2 mana for a 2/1, which feels about right. But if you cast it face down and then turn it face up later, you have a, for all intents and purposes, uncounterable shock. And because you're playing with morphs, 2 damage to any target, as in limited, that's going to kill pretty much anything. In constructed, like in an actual commander game, it's not going to do a lot. But if you are up against people that have morphs or manifest or other face down cards, it's going to take a lot of them out if they cannot turn it face up. Rockshard Elemental. 4/3 double strike for 7. Again, you think of this as an 8/3. Well, 8 and 3 is 11. Cut in half is a 5/6. This is 7 mana. But you're paying a bit extra because it does have double strike. And again, any sort of pump is worth twice as much. So it's fine. You're playing elementals, maybe. I probably wouldn't bother in most stacks. Period. I I'm kind of unthrilled with a lot of their lower end red cards. But once you get past that, Click Slither is playable. Lavaborn Muse is a, if you're dealing with a with a rack style, if you're dealing with like 8 rack style decks, you want something like that. Wordbreak Trumpeter, make a bunch of goblins when you turn it face up. Skirk Drill Sergeant can summon more goblins. Goblin Grappler is a 1/1 with Provoke for 1 mana, which is really good. Goblin Goon is as long as you've got more creatures and you're playing goblins, you probably should. You're good here. Skirk Alarmist. Is basically a hasty squire that can unmorph one of your creatures and then it dies at the end of turn. Imperial Hellkite searches up dragons when it's turned face up, which is lots of fun. Kilnmouth is a giant pinger. You reveal one dragon, and it's going to ping, it's going to be a 5/5 that pings for 3. This just burninates people. This gives your slivers provoke. This pumps your slivers. This can pump your slivers. Make sure one specific sliver does a lot of damage. Goblin Assassin, whenever another goblin. Each player whose coin hunt comes up tails sacrifices a creature. So, yeah. The fun thing about Goblin Assassin is you're commonly going to be playing, like, this is going to happen with Goblin tokens more commonly than not. At which point, cool, Goblin token comes into play. Oh no, it came up tails. I guess I gotta sack a token. Your opponent's going to be sacrificing an actual creature. This is going to be great because this is, I sack a goblin to make all my goblins bigger till end of turn. This is just a big burn spell. So yeah, the bottom half are kind of not great. The top half are actually, but I think about a third of the bottom half are actually quite playable. Green cards. 6 mana for a 3/6 with reach. So 2 mana more than Giant Spider for an extra +1 power and extra +2 toughness. I can kind of see it. I think you should be able to do better than that. But at common, yeah, I think I'm kind of okay with that. And being able to do 3 damage to a flyer is a lot more than dealing 2 damage to a flyer. It might not sound like a lot, but that extra point of damage makes a huge difference in what people are going to try attacking you with. This is going to be a lot stronger than I think most people give it credit for. So if you have an interest in this style of card anyway, Giant Spider style cards, look into it. Vexing Beetle. I am running this in one of my decks for one reason and one reason only. That first line. This spell can't be countered. Where am I? Gruul's fella is literally uncounterable smashing McSmashington. And every creature here says this spell can't be countered. And the only reason that Vexing Beetle makes it in is because it literally says it can't be countered. 28 creatures that specifically say that. And then a handful of other cards that say, hey, by the way, creature spells or whatever can't be countered. Domri, Anarch of Bolas, stops creatures from being countered that turn. Hunter's Mark can't be countered. Rhythm of Wild creature spells can't be countered. Savage Summoning can't be countered. Stonewood Invocation's got Split Second, which for all intents and purposes can't be countered. Insist, Overmaster, and Veil of Summer basically can't be countered. And Cantrip. I've got 6 cards here that I've got basically 6 counter spells up here. 13 pieces of removal, all of which say can't be countered. Mana rocks. Out of my 7 mana rocks, 5 of them can become creatures, and because that's an activated ability, it's a lot harder to counter. 7 manlands. Again, well, kind of 6, because Thespian Stage's job is to copy Dark Depths. Which, again, making a creature that you can't counter it as a creature. And then 30 more land. This turns around allows me to play an instant or sorcery that can't be countered. Yeah. But Vexing Beetle is literally in that deck because of that one line. The deck is literally based around Sfella, and my stuff can't be countered because Sfella is putting stuff into play. Look at the top 4 cards. You may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost, except most spells in general can't be countered. So if you can't stop the activated ability, you're not stopping the spell that I'm casting. Gets +3/+3 as long as no opponent controls the creature. Good luck with that. Somebody else is going to have a creature. Glowering Rogon. Again, you do this for... The problem with this is it's, it has no ability... Like, once you get the Amplify through, it's essentially a vanilla creature. So you've got a 6 mana 4/4 that might get 1 or 2 counters. At 2 counters, it's a 6 mana 6/6. You really need it to be, let's say, 3 counters to be worth it. But it's 6 mana. What's the chance you're going to have, 3 beasts in your hand? Yeah. There's going to be better than that. Hundrug. 7 mana 4/7 was cycling a 3. So basically 5/6, so 5.5. But 7 mana, you should be getting a 5/6, 6/6. Yeah, you're losing a point of combat strength to give it cycling. But it's cycling 3. I feel like a cycling of 3 should just cancel out. Not go towards this. So yeah, you're looking at basically a 5/6 for 7. Nah. You can find better. Canopy Crawler. 4 mana for 2/2 with Amplify 1. Makes a lot more sense. Target creature gets +1 until end of turn for each +1 counter on this creature. Again, don't forget, Amplify has to enter with +1 counters based on what you revealed, but the abilities don't care how the counters got there. So it could be from Iron Shell Beetle or something similar. It just cares that it's got +1 counters somehow. And yeah. You put a couple of cards like this in. Again, a deck like Gov is going to have you have lots of fun with +1 counters. And This could end up with like 5+1 counters on it. It'll end up being a 7/7 that you spent 4 mana on. And you go, hey, by the way, oh no, sorry, it'll be a 6. No, it'll be a 7/7. That suddenly you go, hey, by the way, tap. This creature gets wheel +5/+5 till end of turn. You know, eat your heart out, Thriss. Totem Speaker. Totem Speaker feels like the kind of card that wants Conspiracy, Xenograph, Maskwood Nexus, something of that effect to turn around and make all your creatures, basically all your creatures will come into play and you gain 3 life each. You know, turn everything into a beast. It feels like that kind of card. This is one of those, you know, kind of like when we were talking about zombies earlier. This is like, I'm building beasts, but here is a non-beast that's in my deck. So, maybe. Brontotherium, 6 mana for 5/3 trample with provoke. I can see 5 mana for 5/3 trample. I can wrap my brain around that okay. Lucky victims get run over. Unlucky victims get run through. So you're paying an extra mana for provoke, which is basically saying you're having to block me. But I've got trample and I'm a big creature. You're not going to like this. But you're not going to like this. Yeah. You find a way to give this haste with something like Concordant Crossroads. Yeah. This is going to hurt. Berserk Myrtleon. Merlodont, rather. Five mana for a 3/3. Whenever a beast becomes blocked, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn for each creature blocking it. So if you were blocking with 2/2s, three 2/2s means this gets +3/+3, which means 6/6. Three 2/2s cancel out. A 3/3 loses, two 3/3s win. A 4/4 ties. But again, this is not whenever it becomes blocked. This is whenever a beast becomes blocked. So if you're playing with beasts, you want a card like this in it to make combat math that much more difficult. Also, have trample in there somehow. I doubt it, but actually, bologna, spaghetti, macaroni. Nihilus Forerunner would work. Modified. As long as you control your commander. This and... Okay. And invasion of Perulia. Other transform permanents. Yeah. So realistically, I see 3 cards that are beasts that all incidentally happen to be mono green. That give your that'll give your creatures trample. So yeah, toss a card like this in that deck too, and just enjoy the shenanigans of you know, enjoy the you know the headaches that enjoy the headaches that the combat math will provide. Stonewood Invoker. I think I considered it for my mono green commons only commander deck. Um, I think I considered it. Nope, nope. What do you call it again? Stonewood Invoker. I think I ended up passing on it. Yeah, I ended up passing on it. Because what I really wanted is nothing in 2 for that. Uh, Nothing under 1. 3. 4 or more. Spectral Hunt Caller and Wildheart Invoker. Which Wildheart Invoker, also being an elf, certainly helped. And Spectral Hunt Caller. Like, both these cards not only give a boost, but also give trample. The Hunt Caller gives it to all my creatures till end of turn. And so that made things. So I know I looked at it, but this only affected itself, whereas the other options I could spread around to other targets, and that made them. They also cost less to activate, and that made them that much more valuable. Um, when you're playing with just commons, that's kind of relevant. Patron of the Wild. Again, all but uncounterable. For 3 mana you get an uncounterable giant growth, which I don't know if 3 mana is worth it. The other thing is you're dropping from a 2/2 down to a 1/1. But it can also target itself, which suddenly means it can be a 4/4 till end of turn. But I think realistically you're going to use that elsewhere. And I don't see this as I suppose it's usable. I wouldn't be excited to play this, but it'd be like it's fine. Next you get the throw throwback. 6 mana, amplify 2 and provoke for a 3/3. If you reveal 1, which is at 6 mana, I can see you having 1. You end up with a 5/5 with provoke. I think that's I think that's acceptable. And if you happen to still have 2 when you cast it, you're looking at a 6 mana 7/7 with provoke. If you can get 2, you're going to kill most things with the provoke. Even funnier is if you end up with multiple combats, that can do work. can't Croson Vorine can't be blocked by more than one creature. So can only be blocked by a single creature at a time. If that's the case, so this is the opposite of Menace, because Menace requires more than one. This is like, no, only one. 4 mana for a 3/2 that forces blocking because, again, provoke. But can only be blocked by whatever. The typical way it plays out. You're getting untapped. You're blocking me. You're the only thing that's blocking me. Oh. Again, it's the sort of thing where I want to throw extra abilities on, like First Strike, First Strike and Death Touch, to make sure that whatever it is dead. Sometimes just a giant size boost does a lot too. It is also a cat. There are, maybe you want to throw this in like cat tribal. That would be interesting. Yeah, okay, I could see my way through that. And then when you start looking at the rest of them, it's like, a 1/1 trampling elf is hilarious. 4/1 trample for 3. Enormous Baloth. Its diet consists of fruits, plants, small woodland animals, large woodland animals, woodlands, fruit groves, fruit farmers, and small cities. Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah, and then a lot of these I can see actually. Oh, and this technically has a multicolor identity, which is why it did not show up under red. 4 mana for a 3/3. Tap and sack a forest. Add 3 mana in a combination of red and green mana. Because of the modern Oracle text, it has a red-green color identity. Because of the modern Oracle text, it has a red-green color identity. But if you're doing that and you occasionally need a boost of mana, and you're looking at cards like Orcish, you're looking at cards like Orcish Lumberjack. Which, let's go down to Ice Age, just because I'm more amused by that picture. 1 red. Tap, sack a forest, add 3 mana in any combination of red and or green. Common Clear Cutter. Tap, sack a forest, add 3 mana in any color combination of red and or green. Except it's a 4 mana 3/3 goblin instead of a 1 mana 1/1 orc. Yeah. And that's it. So, just for lulz, let's see what's in Scourge. Oh, yes. Temple of the False God is in enough commander sets that I'm not calling that. Forgotten Ancient is kind of a forgotten card. Carrying the Feeder gets played a bunch in a bunch of places. Same with Brain Freeze. Decree of Pain? Maybe. Dragon Speaker Shaman. Yeah, I just might do Dragon Speaker Shaman. Oh yeah, just out of curiosity. You. Okay. The most expensive printing is this one, which is still under $2. Alright, but that's it for tonight. We'll see you guys next week. Pasta la pizza, everyone. So long and thanks for all the pastrami sandwiches, or whatever. Good night.